Divers kept finding them damaged, tails missing, bodies ending in blunt, healed-over stumps. Great white sharks patrolled the same water, so the answer looked obvious. Something was eating them alive. It wasn't. Nothing was attacking these animals. The fish were taking themselves apart on purpose and surviving it. That scar shows up on almost every large oarfish anyone has ever examined. Not some, almost every single one. Essentially, every specimen over about 1.5 meters has already shortened its own body this way, and most of them have done it more than once. It isn't a small cut either. An oarfish can shed everything behind its vent, which sits roughly 2/3 of the way down its body. It can do it repeatedly, section by section, over the course of its life. The leading expert on these animals concluded the process can continue until the entire rear portion is gone and only the head and abdomen remain. This creature can, over time, delete most of itself and keep swimming. 200 kinds of invertebrates can drop a body part. Almost no fish can. The oarfish may be the only one on Earth that does anything like this, and it's the most extreme version of the behavior anyone has documented in any animal. So, how does a fish survive removing 2/3 of itself? Why would it? And why does nearly every single one of them do it? The answers are stranger than the scar, and they start with the kind of life that forces an animal into that decision. Because everything about the oarfish's existence is strange, right from the first fact about it. Start with size, because it's the thing nobody believes. The oarfish is the longest bony fish on Earth. Not the longest deep sea fish, the longest bony fish, period, of every species alive. Reliable measurements top out around 8 meters, roughly 26 feet, with weights over 270 kilograms. And there's a wrinkle that makes even that number slippery. Like a lot of deep sea animals, the oarfish doesn't seem to stop growing the way surface animals do. Growth appears to continue through much of its life, which means an old oarfish isn't just older than a young one, it's longer. Now, the name. You'll hear people say it's called the oarfish because it rows itself along with its long pelvic fins, like oars. That's a nice story, and it's wrong. Those long, thin pelvic fins simply look like oars. That's the whole origin. It doesn't row anything. Its scientific family name, Regalesidae, comes from the Latin for royal, which is where the other common name comes from, king of the herrings. And honestly, once you see one, royal is the word that fits. A silver ribbon of an animal with a flame-red crest rising off its skull like a crown. Here's the part that reframes everything else in this video. For almost all of human history, essentially everything we knew about this animal came from dead bodies. The first specimen was formally described back in 1771 by a Danish naturalist who found one washed up on a Norwegian beach. And for the next 2 centuries, that was the entire scientific method for this species. Wait for one to die and hope it drifts somewhere you can reach it. Across every temperate coastline on the planet, over more than 200 years, fewer than 250 strandings have ever been documented. For an animal that can reach 26 feet, that number is almost impossible to accept. We had a giant, and we only ever met its corpses. So when one does turn up, it makes news. In 2013, an 18-foot oarfish washed up near Catalina Island in California. It took 15 people to haul the body out of the water. In 2024, California had 3 separate sightings, including one in San Diego that was the region's first in nearly 125 years. All 3 were dead. The reason we almost never see them alive stops being mysterious the second you learn where they live. The oarfish belongs to the mesopelagic zone, the twilight zone, running from roughly 200 down to 1,000 meters below the surface. Sunlight fades out fast down there. There's not enough of it for photosynthesis, and past a certain depth, there's effectively none at all. The pressure would kill an unprotected human. It's cold, It's dark. And critically, food is scarce and unpredictable, drifting down from above or moving through in patches. But calling it empty would be badly wrong, and this is where a lot of deep-sea videos get it backwards. The twilight zone is not a dead void. It may hold more fish biomass than the rest of the ocean combined. It's crossed by currents, and every single night it empties upward. Countless animals rise from the darkness toward the surface to feed under cover of night, then sink back down before dawn. It is the largest migration of life on the planet, happening every night in the dark, almost entirely unwatched. The oarfish lives inside that vertical rhythm in a place that is simultaneously one of the busiest habitats on Earth and one of the emptiest, depending on the hour. The catch is that all that life is in motion and is patchy. A meal might drift past, it might not. There's no guarantee, no season, no reliable schedule you can build a body around. And that unpredictability is the single most important fact about this animal because it explains almost everything else about its design. You'll sometimes hear it said that the oarfish never develop muscle because the deep is perfectly still. That's not right, and the distinction is the whole key to this video. The oarfish isn't muscleless because it never needed muscle. It's muscleless because it can't afford muscle. Muscle is metabolically expensive. It costs energy to keep alive whether you use it or not. Building and maintaining a powerful athletic body in a place where food arrives at random would starve you. So evolution went the opposite direction and built something that barely spends anything at all. And that logic, spend as little as physically possible, is the thread running through this whole animal. Hold on to it, because it's going to lead us straight to the amputation. Look at how it's built. The oarfish has no scales. Instead, it's coated in a silvery mirror-like layer called guanine, smooth and reflective. It has no swim bladder in the usual sense that other fish use to hold position. Its flesh is soft, gelatinous, low density. There is almost nothing structurally expensive on this animal anywhere. Then there's the brain. When Japanese researchers finally got fresh specimens and put an oarfish head through an MRI scanner, they found a brain roughly 1 inch long. 1 inch. In an animal that can exceed 8 meters. That's one of the most extreme brain-to-body ratios of any vertebrate on Earth. The brain is about half the size of the eye. A creature the length of a school bus running on a processor the size of a pea. And it doesn't swim like other fish. Almost every fish you can picture swims horizontally, body flexing side to side. The oarfish hangs vertically in the water, head pointed up toward the surface, tail hanging down into the dark. It holds that position and barely moves its body at all. What moves is the enormous dorsal fin running nearly the entire length of its back, a long red ribbon that sends waves rippling down its length, and that's what steers it. Forward, backward, up, down, all from that one undulating fin, while the body itself stays almost perfectly still. When divers finally saw this behavior for themselves, that stillness was the thing that struck them hardest. The animal wasn't drifting helplessly. It was holding position with real precision, controlling itself in a way that looks like nothing else in the ocean, and doing it while spending almost no energy. The story of how anyone got to see that at all is almost absurd. In the summer of 2000, an oceanographic buoy was anchored about 40 miles off the coast of Nice, France, in water nearly 8,000 feet deep. Its purpose was mundane: measure the color of the ocean and transmit the data to satellites for calibration. Nobody involved was thinking about giant fish. But the ocean doesn't care what you built something for. The buoy's frame, its chains, and even the shadow it cast started changing the water around it. Algae colonized the structure. Small fish arrived to eat the algae. Larger fish arrived to eat the small fish. Tuna showed up. Great white sharks were eventually seen circling it in slow rings. A scientific instrument had accidentally grown its own ecosystem in the middle of open water. Every month, a diver went down to scrub the optical sensors clean, and the brushing created vibrations that traveled down the cable into the deep. Sound behaves very differently in water than in air. It carries. One day in spring, during the annual plankton bloom, a living oarfish rose out of the darkness below, possibly drawn by exactly those vibrations. It was the first time in recorded history a human being had met one in the water. And here's the statistic that tells you everything about how hard this animal is to study. Across more than 120 dives at that same buoy afterward, it appeared only twice more. Even then, there was a problem. Scuba divers exhale constantly, and to an animal whose evolutionary history contains no bubbles whatsoever, that disturbance is enough to send it straight back into the dark. The fix was a rebreather, a closed-circuit system that releases nothing into the water. With that, and by timing the dives to the spring plankton bloom when more animals were moving through, researchers finally got a living oarfish to stay long enough to be watched properly. The one they filmed was nearly 5 meters long, the largest ever observed alive in the Mediterranean. They even managed something nobody had done before. They gently collected mucus from its skin without harming it. It was the first genetic material ever taken from a living oarfish rather than a corpse. The skin itself turned out to be another oddity, smooth, scaleless, and apparently almost completely insensitive to touch. The fish held its position and seemed entirely unbothered by being swabbed. That mucus produced a surprise. The genetic difference between oarfish samples came out around 10%, a large gap for animals assumed to be the same species. It supported the idea that what we've been calling the oarfish is really more than one animal. Regalicus glezan dominating temperate waters worldwide, and Regalicus russellii dominating warmer Pacific waters around Japan, Korea, and China. Physically, they're nearly identical, and the main visible difference is that one has a handful more crest rays on its crown than the other. That's how fine the line is, and the map is still being redrawn. In 2021, a Regalicus russellii was caught off western Sri Lanka, the first confirmed record of that species in the tropical Indian Ocean. While we're correcting the record, those old accounts of 17-meter oarfish, the ones that fed the sea serpent legend and still show up in books, are almost certainly not reliable. The longest properly measured specimens come in around 8 meters. The bigger numbers came from sailors estimating size at sea, photographs shot at flattering angles, and long bodies stretched across decks in ways that distorted their proportions. As one commenter put it perfectly, every time a fisherman tells the story, the fish gets bigger. So now we have the full picture of what this animal is. A giant, built as cheaply as biology allows, hanging motionless in the dark, running on a pea-sized brain, in a place where food barely arrives. Every single design decision in that body says the same thing: conserve. Spend nothing you don't have to. Which brings us, finally, to the scar. For a long time, nobody had a good explanation for it. Look at photographs of large, stranded oarfish, and you will notice it immediately. The body doesn't taper to a proper tail. It just stops. There's a blunt end, often healed over, sometimes ragged. Some specimens are missing enormous portions of their rear half. And when divers began encountering live oarfish, they saw the same thing. Animals swimming around perfectly healthy with big sections of themselves simply gone. The obvious explanation was predators. Great white sharks had been observed in the same waters. Something must be biting them. But the evidence for that was thin, and the more people looked, the thinner it got. For an animal this size, the oarfish has remarkably few confirmed predators. No documented shark attack on an oarfish has ever actually been recorded. The one verified case of predation involved pilot whales. And here's the detail that really breaks the theory. If sharks were doing this, why would the damage appear in the same place, in the same way, on nearly every single large individual ever examined? Predation is chaotic. This wasn't chaotic. This was consistent. The answer came from Tyson Roberts, a research associate of the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute and the world's leading authority on this genus. Studying specimens and compiling everything known about the family, he proposed something that sounds almost unbelievable. That distinctive scar on the end of nearly every large oarfish isn't the result of an attack at all. It's the result of autotomy, self-amputation. The fish is cutting away its own body. Once you accept that premise, the evidence that seemed confusing snaps into focus. The consistency stops being strange and becomes the whole point. The damage looks the same on animal after animal because it isn't damage, it's a process. The healed, clean terminus stops looking like a survived attack and starts looking like a closed door. Even the location makes sense. The break happens behind the vent, in the one region of the body where nothing irreplaceable lives. A shark doesn't check anatomy before it bites. This does. Autotomy itself isn't unique. A lizard dropping its tail to escape a predator is doing exactly this, and the behavior has evolved independently at least 9 separate times across the animal kingdom. But what the oarfish does is on a completely different scale, and it works in a completely different way. A lizard has one trick and one breakpoint. It drops its tail at a set place once, and that's the end of the story. The regrown tail is a cartilage rod with no fracture planes, so it can't do it again in the same spot. The oarfish operates on a completely different system. It doesn't have one breakpoint. It has a whole body's worth of them, running all the way from the tail tip forward to just before the abdomen. Scientists call this serial autotomy, not one emergency escape, but a repeatable, progressive process that an animal can perform over and over across its lifetime. So how does an animal actually cut itself in half? In the creatures we understand best, autotomy isn't tearing. It is controlled demolition. The body has predetermined weak points, fracture planes that run straight through the bone rather than between the joints, with matching partitions through the surrounding muscle and connective tissue so everything separates cleanly along the same line. Detachment is active. Specific muscles around that plane contract hard, snapping the vertebra and severing the section. And crucially, the whole arrangement is built to minimize blood loss and seal the wound fast. It isn't an injury the animal recovers from. It's a mechanism the animal operates, which explains something you'd otherwise never accept. That healed, blunt terminus on nearly every large specimen. The oarfish isn't surviving a catastrophe. It's closing a door that was designed to close. Now here's the piece of engineering that makes the whole thing possible, and it's beautiful in a slightly horrifying way. The oarfish can afford to throw away that much of itself because of where its organs are. Everything vital, the entire functional core of the animal, is packed into the front portion, in and around the head and abdomen. Everything behind the vent is essentially structural: body wall, muscle, fin, spine. Expensive to maintain, not essential to stay alive. So when the fish sheds 2/3 of its length, it isn't cutting into anything that keeps it functioning. There's no wound to a vital organ because there are no vital organs back there. The body is built like a machine, with a detachable, disposable rear half. And the fossil record suggests they've been doing this for a very long time. The only known oarfish fossil, roughly 2.2 million years old, preserves the rear part of the body drawn inward in a way consistent with exactly this process. This behavior is older than our species, which leaves the question the whole video has been building toward. Why? And here's where I have to be straight with you, because this is the honest part, and it's more interesting than a tidy answer would be. Despite everything we've figured out about how the oarfish does this, the purpose of the behavior is still formally listed as unknown. Multiple published papers say exactly that. We know it happens. We know it happens to nearly every large individual repeatedly. We do not know for certain why. But there are hypotheses, and they're genuinely fascinating. The first, and the one that fits everything we've said about this animal's life, is energy conservation. Go back to the core problem. The oarfish lives where calories are scarce, and it has spent its entire evolutionary history stripping away anything expensive. A long body costs something to maintain, tissue to keep alive, structure to hold together, and drag to overcome. If you're an animal running on the thinnest possible energy budget and you're starting to run short, shortening yourself lowers your running costs. You're not amputating to escape a predator. You're amputating to lower your bills. Under this reading, the oarfish's body is something like a metabolic emergency fund. When the ocean stops delivering, it can shed a section and survive on less. The second hypothesis, which Roberts himself has raised, is about swimming efficiency. Since the oarfish moves almost entirely through undulations of that long dorsal fin, an extremely long trailing body might be more of a burden than an asset. Cut it down, and the animal may simply move and hold position better. There's also a broader framing that stayed with me, that the process is a kind of progressive metamorphosis, where the animal transforms into a body plan that conserves only its gonads and vital organs. In other words, over its life, the oarfish sheds everything that isn't strictly necessary for staying alive and reproducing, until what remains is the irreducible core. To appreciate how clean that arrangement is, look at what self-amputation costs almost everything else that does it. There's a scorpion in South America that sheds its tail to escape predators. Except a scorpion's anus is located on the final tail segment, so when it drops that tail, it permanently loses the rear of its own digestive system. It can never defecate again. It can never sting again. It survives, and males can go on living and mating for months, but it is walking around slowly filling up with its own waste, unable to hunt anything but the smallest prey. That's the usual bargain with autotomy. You buy your life, and the price is a body that never works properly again. The oarfish pays almost nothing. It sheds 2/3 of itself and loses no organ, no function, no capability that keeps it alive. That's not a desperate trade. That's a body designed from the beginning to come apart. There's also evidence the behavior is deeply individual. The extent of the amputation and the number of times it happens appears to come down to a single animal's own history, what it went through, how food went, what it needed to survive. Two oarfish of the same age could be radically different lengths because they lived different lives and made different cuts, which is a strange and slightly haunting idea. The length of an oarfish is a record. You can look at that healed stump and know that at some point, this animal made a decision, or something in its biology made a decision for it, that a portion of its own body was no longer worth carrying. Now step back and look at the whole animal again, because with this in place, everything finally clicks together. Every single thing about the oarfish points in one direction. It has no scales, because scales cost energy. It has almost no muscle, because muscle costs energy. It has a soft, gelatinous, low-density body, because dense tissue costs energy. It has one of the smallest brains relative to body size of any vertebrate, because brains are metabolically expensive. A brain is one of the hungriest organs an animal can carry. It hangs motionless instead of swimming actively because movement costs energy. It steers with a single ribbon of fin instead of its whole body because that's cheaper. And when all of that still isn't cheap enough, it discards part of itself. That's the answer the title promised. The oarfish survives by deleting itself because it evolved in a place where the only viable strategy is to spend as little as physically possible. And it has followed that strategy further than almost any other animal alive. It didn't build armor. It didn't build speed. It didn't build a bigger brain. It built a body that could be reduced. But the self-amputation is only the most dramatic of this animal's unsolved problems. Because the deeper researchers pushed, the more of them they found. And some of them are even stranger. Take the way it smells. For decades, across every specimen anyone examined, scientists could not find nostrils on an oarfish. Not misplaced ones. None. Which was bizarre, because smell is the primary sense for locating anything in a lightless environment. Then, in the winter of 2014, more than a dozen fresh oarfish washed ashore in southern Japan over the course of a few months, enough intact material to run modern imaging. And the scans finally found them. The nostrils were at the absolute front of the snout, opening forward, essentially positioned inside the mouth. Think about what that means practically. To smell anything at all, the oarfish has to swim with its jaws partly open, pumping water forward across those front-facing nostrils. And because they are forward-facing, they cannot triangulate a scent the way you can with two nostrils on either side of a head. So the working theory is that the fish turns its head, samples, turns again, samples again, and follows whichever direction gives the strongest signal, homing in through trial and error. One researcher described it as a kind of underwater game of blind man's bluff, an animal 8 meters long navigating a lightless ocean with almost no landmarks, running on a 1-inch brain, finding food by slowly rotating its head until the smell gets stronger. That is either the most inefficient system imaginable or a perfect solution for a creature that has nothing but time and no energy to waste. Then there's the light. During a night dive, researchers swapped their white lamps for ultraviolet ones, and two previously unknown bioluminescent organs lit up on the oarfish's head. One on the forehead, one under the chin. Nobody had ever found them before, for the simple reason that nobody had ever been down in the twilight zone with a living oarfish and the right lights. The current thinking is that these serve two functions, drawing prey toward the mouth and making the animal visible to other oarfish in a world with no other light. That mirror-like silver skin may be doing something related. One of the oarfish's main food sources is krill, bioluminescent krill that produce their own faint glow. The leading hypothesis is that the oarfish's reflective body simply mirrors that ambient krill light, effectively making the fish invisible both to the prey it's drifting toward and to anything watching from below. It cannot produce light of its own, so it borrows the light already there. That krill diet leaves another fingerprint too. The fiery red of the oarfish's crest and fins comes from krill pigment. The color of this animal is literally made of what it eats, the deep sea equivalent of flamingos turning pink from shrimp. And then there's the mystery I can't stop thinking about. In January 2019, 2 oarfish were caught in a commercial net off Okinawa. One was already dead, the other was alive, but had lost its tail during capture. Before losing them entirely, researchers performed artificial insemination, producing the first reliable record of oarfish reproduction ever documented. Around 400 eggs were fertilized. The eggs themselves were strange enough, buoyant, bright red, released to drift in the open ocean with no parental care of any kind. Most open ocean fish eggs hatch in 1 to 3 days. These took 18. Then the larvae hatched and immediately did everything wrong. Adults hang vertically, head up, and steer with the dorsal fin. The larvae spent most of their time pointing downward and swam with their pectoral fins instead. Each one carried an absurdly elongated dorsal fin filament, averaging nearly twice its own body length, and nobody has any idea what it's for. Despite having fully functional mouths, not one of them ate. Researchers offered rotifers, brine shrimp, enriched feed, nothing. Across the entire observation period, their mouths opened a total of 6 times. Within 4 days of hatching, all of them were dead. So what do baby oarfish eat? We still have no idea. Maybe something about the tank was wrong in a way nobody could identify. Maybe they feed on something so specific to the open ocean that nothing offered in captivity even resembled it. Either way, One of the most basic questions you can ask about an animal, what do its young eat, is, for the longest bony fish on Earth, completely unanswered. Which brings us to the legend, because you can't talk about this animal without it. In Japan, the oarfish is known as Ryugu no Tsukai, the messenger from the Dragon King's palace, and tradition holds that its appearance warns of an earthquake. The story got enormous attention because in the period before the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, around 20 oarfish were reported along Japanese shores. Then the most powerful earthquake in Japan's recorded history struck, and the tsunami killed or left missing roughly 18,500 people. People remembered the legend. Media outlets now routinely call it the Doomsday Fish, and the label has stuck hard. A fish appeared on a Southern California beach in November 2024, and a month later, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake struck off the West Coast. That pairing went everywhere. So in 2019, a team of Japanese researchers actually tested it properly, comparing hundreds of deep-sea fish sightings against earthquake records across decades. Out of the entire data set, they found exactly one case where a strong earthquake occurred within 30 days and 100 kilometers of a sighting. One. The correlation people believe in doesn't survive contact with the numbers. Researchers tracking global sightings have reached the same conclusion. Oarfish turn up around the world every year with no connection to seismic activity at all. The far more likely explanation for a surfacing oarfish is much sadder and much simpler. An oarfish near the surface is usually sick, injured, disoriented, or dying. Some researchers also point to shifting ocean conditions, including cycles like El Nino and La Nina, changing where these fish are and how often they end up in shallow water. But here's what I find remarkable about that. The legend turned out to be false, and the animal underneath the legend turned out to be far stranger than the myth ever was. We invented a story about a fish that predicts disasters. The reality is a fish that hangs vertically in the dark, sees with a mirror, smells through its mouth, glows from its face, and survives by systematically deleting its own body. Nobody needed to make anything up. That gap between what we imagined and what's actually down there is the real point. Because here's the uncomfortable truth underneath this entire story. Almost every oarfish that has ever entered the human record came to us by accident, washed ashore, tangled in a net, floating near the surface where it almost certainly didn't belong. We have very rarely gone into its world and found it on our own terms. Even the live encounters that produce the best footage we have happened largely by chance. Divers maintaining an oceanographic buoy who happened to look down at the right moment, then spent over 100 dives at the same site and saw an oarfish only a handful of times. So consider the arithmetic. This is an animal up to 8 meters long. It is unmistakable. There is nothing else in the ocean you could confuse it with. It lives in an ocean layer we've been sampling for a century, and we still don't know what its babies eat, when it spawns, how long it lives, how far its range really extends, or why it removes 2/3 of its own body. If a fish that big, that distinctive, and that impossible to mistake can stay this unknown for this long, then the real question isn't about the oarfish at all. It's about everything else down there that has never washed ashore, never surfaced, and never accidentally drifted close enough for us to notice. The deep ocean is the largest habitat on this planet. It drives our climate. It shapes our weather. Every night, it hosts the single largest migration on Earth. More biomass moves up and down through the water column than the Great Migration in Africa. And this all happens in the dark, every single night, mostly unwatched. And we have explored less of it than we have the surface of the moon. Whatever is down there isn't waiting to be discovered. It is just continuing the way it has for millions of years, deleting what it does not need and holding perfectly still in water we have barely learned how to visit.